Why do women secretly find older men so irresistible, even when they're not looking for it? It's not about age. It's about the 7 magnetic traits they've mastered that younger men often overlook. But here's the twist. The last trait on this list is the one that will change everything. And if you skip to the end, you'll miss the foundation that makes it work. Whether you're 25 or 55, these traits aren't just for older men. They're timeless tools to build a presence that commands attention, inspires trust, and leaves a lasting impression. So if you want to know why women gravitate toward men who've got their life together, and how you can start building that same magnetism today, keep watching. But don't skip ahead. The final trait only works if you've mastered the first 6. Trait 1. Confidence and direction. Confidence isn't just about walking into a room. It's about knowing why you're there. Older men often radiate this quiet certainty because they've spent years refining their priorities. They're not paralyzed by indecision or approval seeking. They've got a clear direction in life, and that clarity is magnetic. Imagine this. You're at a dinner party and the conversation turns to career goals. A younger man might hem and haw, listing options or waiting for others to weigh in. An older man with confidence and direction, he'll say, I'm building a sustainable business model to solve X problem. No hesitation, no apologies. He's not just confident, he's direct. This isn't arrogance, it's the result of years of trial and error, of learning what truly matters. When you know your purpose, you stop wasting time on distractions. You make decisions swiftly, not recklessly. You lead conversations instead of following them. And women notice. They notice the man who orders for the table without asking for input, not because he's controlling, but because he's decisive. They notice the man who plans a trip to Japan instead of scrolling through travel blogs for months. This trait isn't age exclusive. It's a skill honed by experience. But here's the kicker. Confidence without direction is just bravado. Direction gives confidence purpose. It's the difference between a man who says, I'm a leader, and one who acts like a leader. So ask yourself, do you know what you want? Not just in relationships, but in life. Because women aren't just drawn to confidence. They're drawn to men who know where they're going. Trait 2, emotional maturity. Emotional maturity isn't about never feeling anger or frustration. It's about choosing how you respond. Older men who've mastered this trait don't just avoid drama, they transform it into growth. Imagine a disagreement over finances. A less mature man might escalate tensions, blame, or shut down. An emotionally mature man, he'll pause, acknowledge the tension, and say, let's talk about this when we're both calm. Not to avoid the issue, but to solve it. This isn't about being passive, it's about self-awareness. He knows his triggers, his limits, and his goals. He communicates clearly without being confrontational. He listens actively, not just to respond, but to understand. And when the conversation heats up, he steers it towards solutions, not blame. Why does this matter? Women crave safety, not just physical safety, but emotional safety. They want a partner who can handle life's storms without crumbling. Emotional maturity creates that stability. It's the man who stays calm during a crisis, who apologizes when he's wrong, and who doesn't take disagreements personally. It's the man who says, I'm sorry I hurt you, instead of you're overreacting. This trait isn't just about relationships, it's about respect. When you handle conflicts with grace, you're not just resolving issues. You're showing that you value the other person's feelings. You're showing that you're invested in growth, not just in being right. And that's what women remember. The man who made them feel heard, validated, and safe, even in the toughest moments. Trait 3, wisdom and experience. Wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing what truly matters. Older men who've lived through triumphs and setbacks, successes and failures, carry a depth that younger men often can't replicate. They've seen trends come and go, watched relationships rise and fall, and learned to separate noise from substance. This isn't just experience, it's earned perspective. Imagine sitting across from a man who's navigated career pivots, raised children, and weathered economic downturns. When you confide in him about your job stress, he doesn't just offer advice. He shares a story about his own struggles in the 90s, then ties it to actionable strategies. When you're torn between two life paths, he doesn't lecture. He asks questions that help you see the answer. This is why they're great conversationalists. They don't dominate discussions with opinions. They ask probing questions, listen deeply, and share insights that cut through the chaos. They've learned that wisdom isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions. And when problems arise, they don't panic. They've seen enough storms to know that most challenges are temporary and that solutions often lie in patience, not panic. Women notice this. They notice the man who doesn't just offer solutions, but context. The man who says, I've seen this before, here's what worked for me, instead of you should do X. The man who turns a casual chat into a meaningful exchange, not because he's trying to impress, but because he's genuinely invested in understanding. This trait isn't just about age, it's about intentional living. It's the result of years spent reflecting, learning, and growing. But here's the good news. You don't need decades to build it. Start now. Read widely, seek mentors, and embrace challenges as teachers. Because when you can offer wisdom, not just advice, you become the man women turn to, not just for answers, but for guidance. Trait 4, financial stability. Financial stability isn't about flaunting wealth, it's about freedom. Older men who've built security aren't just better at managing money, they've mastered the art of responsibility. They've learned to prioritize needs over wants, to save for the future without sacrificing today, and to view independence as a strength, not a burden. Imagine this. You're planning a vacation with someone. A financially unstable partner might stress about costs, hesitate to commit, or worse, expect you to foot the bill. A man with financial stability? He'll book the trip confidently, knowing he's saved for it. He'll discuss budgets openly, not because he's cheap, but because he respects the value of money. He'll plan for emergencies without anxiety, because he's built a safety net. This isn't just about money, it's about security. When a man can provide for himself and others, he exudes a quiet confidence that's deeply attractive. Women notice the man who pays bills on time, who invests in his future, and who doesn't panic during economic dips. They notice the man who says, let's save for a down payment, instead of let's splurge on a weekend getaway. But here's the nuance. Financial stability isn't about being rich. It's about being intentional. It's the man who cooks at home instead of ordering takeout every night, not because he's frugal, but because he's disciplined. It's the man who repairs his car instead of leasing a new one, not because he's cheap, but because he values long-term value. This trait matters because it creates emotional safety. When a partner is financially stable, they're less likely to stress about money, less likely to cling to you for security, and more likely to focus on building the relationship. They're not just providers, they're partners. And here's the best part. This is a skill anyone can learn. Start budgeting, invest in yourself, and prioritize needs over wants. Because when you master financial stability, you're not just securing your future. You're securing the trust of those around you. Trait 5, charisma and style. Charisma isn't just charm, it's presence. Older men who've honed this trait don't just walk into a room, they own it. They've got a refined sense of style that's not about trends, but about timeless sophistication. Imagine a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, dressed in a tailored navy suit that fits perfectly. Not too tight, not too loose. He's not flashy, he's polished. His watch isn't a gaudy status symbol. It's a classic leather strap that whispers, I've earned this. This isn't about vanity, it's about self-respect. When you dress with intention, you're signaling that you value yourself and others. The man who irons his shirts, who knows how to tie a tie, who wears shoes that are polished but not pristine, he's not trying to impress. He's confident in his own skin. And that confidence is magnetic. But charisma goes beyond looks. It's the way he carries himself. Shoulders back, eye contact steady, voice calm but commanding. It's the way he laughs at himself, not just at others. It's the way he tells stories that draw people in, not because they're flashy, but because they're authentic. Women notice this. They notice the man who doesn't need to shout to be heard, who doesn't need to brag to prove himself. They notice the man who walks into a crowded bar and commands attention, Not because he's loud, but because he's unapologetically himself. And here's the secret. Style is a skill. You don't need a designer wardrobe to pull it off. Learn what works for your body, invest in quality over quantity, and own it. Because when you look put together, you feel put together. And that confidence, it's contagious. Trait 6, respectful behavior. Respect isn't about grand gestures, it's about consistent kindness. Older men who've mastered this trait don't just treat women with respect. They treat everyone with respect. They're the man who holds the door for a stranger, who listens to the waiter's recommendations without interrupting, who asks for input from colleagues regardless of their title. They're the man who says thank you to the barista, who nods at the janitor, who doesn't talk over others. This isn't about being polite, it's about valuing humanity. When you treat others with respect, you're signaling that you see them as equals, not just as people who can serve you. Women notice this. They notice the man who doesn't just open doors for them, but who also respects their boundaries, their opinions, and their time. They notice the man who says, I disagree, but I'd love to hear why you think that instead of, you're wrong. But here's why this resonates so deeply. Respect breeds trust. When a partner treats you with kindness, you feel safe to be yourself. You feel safe to disagree, to make mistakes, to grow. And that's what women crave, not just romance, but authenticity. The man who respects others isn't just a good partner, he's a good person. This trait isn't age exclusive, it's a choice. Start small, practice active listening, ask questions instead of assumptions. Say please and thank you, like they matter. Because when you treat others with respect, you're not just building relationships, you're building character. Trait 7, authenticity and humility. Authenticity isn't about perfection, it's about unapologetic honesty. Older men who've mastered this trait don't just avoid games, they've shed the need to perform. They're the man who admits when he's wrong, who laughs at his own flaws, and who doesn't pretend to know everything. Imagine this. You're arguing about politics, and he says, I've always thought X, but hearing your perspective makes me question that. He's not afraid to change his mind. He's not afraid to say, I don't know. This isn't weakness, it's strength. When you're comfortable in your own skin, you stop trying to impress. You stop pretending to be the cool guy or the expert. You start being human, and that's magnetic. Women notice the man who doesn't hide his quirks, who doesn't apologize for his passions, and who doesn't mask his vulnerabilities. They notice the man who says, I'm nervous about this, instead of, I've got this under control. But here's the magic of humility. It fosters connection. When you admit mistakes, you invite others to do the same. When you embrace growth, you create space for mutual learning. Imagine a man who says, I messed up last week. I'm working on it. Instead of, I'm perfect. That's the man who builds trust. That's the man who turns acquaintances into friends and friends into lifelong partners. This trait isn't age exclusive. It's a choice. Start by dropping the act. Stop pretending to be someone you're not. Admit when you're wrong and thank others for correcting you. Because when you're humble, you're not just growing, you're inviting others to grow with you. So, what makes older men magnetic? It's not just age. It's the 7 traits they've honed over time. Confidence that's rooted in purpose, maturity that turns drama into solutions, wisdom that guides without lecturing, financial stability that breeds security, charisma that's polished but authentic, respectfulness that values every person, and authenticity that invites real connection. But here's the best part. These traits aren't locked behind a birthday. You don't need decades to develop them. You can start today. Ask yourself, where am I playing games instead of being honest? Where am I stressing about money instead of building stability? Where am I pretending to be someone I'm not? Start small. Practice one trait this week. Maybe it's saying I don't know instead of faking it. Maybe it's budgeting for the future instead of splurging. Maybe it's listening more than you talk. Because the truth is, magnetism isn't about age. It's about intention. So don't wait. Don't wait until you're older, until you've figured it out, until you've got the perfect suit or the right words. Start now. Cultivate confidence, maturity, wisdom, stability, charisma, respect, and authenticity. Because when you do, you'll stop chasing attention, and attention will start chasing you. You don't need to wait until you're older to develop these traits. Start today and watch your magnetism grow.